My wife told me the baby looks like her side of the family. The doctor pulled me aside after the delivery and asked to speak with me alone. Nurses avoided eye contact. My father-in-law wouldn't stop smiling. I already knew what he was going to say before he said it. I'm going to tell you exactly how a beautiful moment turned into the worst afternoon of my life and how I turned it into the best decision I ever made. Before we get into it, if you like stories about people finding out the hard way what they married, hit subscribe, because this one gets worse before it gets better. I'm 33, my wife Danielle is 31. We'd been together 6 years, married for 3. Danielle got pregnant last spring, and honestly, it was the happiest I'd ever seen her. She cried when she saw the positive test. I cried too, not going to lie. We painted the nursery, argued about names for months, landed on Wesley if it was a boy. I built the crib myself, badly. Took me 2 tries and a YouTube tutorial, but I got it done. Around month 6, Danielle started saying things like, "I bet he's going to have my dad's nose," or "He's already got my family's stubbornness, watch." Small comments. I brushed them off. Every pregnant woman does that, right? Hopes the kid takes after her side. My mother did the same thing with me, apparently, so I never thought twice about it. Delivery day came 3 weeks ago. 22 hours of labor. I was there the entire time, holding her hand, feeding her ice chips, getting yelled at for breathing too loud at one point, the whole experience. When Wesley finally came out, I actually cried again. Cut the cord, held him for the first time, felt that whole rush people talk about. Danielle looked exhausted but glowing, and she looked at me and said, "See, told you he'd look like my side." I laughed it off. Didn't think much of it in the moment. I was too busy staring at this tiny human who apparently already had opinions about being alive, based on how loud he was screaming. About 90 minutes later, a nurse asked if she could get me for a moment. Said the doctor wanted to speak with me. Nothing alarming in her tone, so I figured it was standard paperwork, insurance stuff, something about the birth certificate. I kissed Danielle's forehead, told her I'd be right back, and followed the nurse down the hall. The doctor, an older guy named Dr. Alvarez, brought me into a small office, not an exam room, an actual office with a desk and 2 chairs. That's when I started feeling something was off. He asked me to sit down. I didn't. "Mr. Reyes, I want to preface this by saying everything with your wife and your son is completely fine. Healthy delivery, no complications. Okay, good start." Then he paused in that way doctors pause right before they ruin your week. "There's a medical detail I'm required to discuss with you directly. Your son's blood type came back as AB negative." I nodded slowly like that meant something to me, because it didn't yet. "Can I ask your blood type, Mr. Reyes?" "O positive," I said. I knew that one, because I'd donated blood a dozen times. They always tell you. He nodded like he already suspected as much. "And your wife's?" "A positive, I think." He was quiet for a second, choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Reyes, biologically, 2 parents with O and A positive blood types cannot produce a child with AB negative blood. It's not possible under standard genetic inheritance patterns. I'm obligated to inform you of this finding. I'm not making any accusations. I'm simply required to disclose medically relevant information that could affect the child's care going forward." The room got very quiet. I remember staring at a poster on the wall about hand-washing technique, just staring at it, letting my brain catch up to what he'd actually said. "So you're telling me," I said slowly, "that this isn't my son?" "I'm telling you the blood type is not biologically consistent with both of you being the biological parents. I can't make a paternity determination from blood type alone with full certainty, but statistically, the combination you've described would be extremely unlikely, essentially not possible, under normal genetics. A paternity test would give you a definitive answer." I thanked him. I don't even remember what I said exactly. Something professional and calm, because apparently my brain decided that's how I was going to handle finding out my son wasn't my son, with the emotional range of someone being told his flight got delayed. I walked back down that hallway in a weird kind of fog. Past a vending machine, thought about buying a soda, didn't. Got back to the room where Danielle was holding Wesley, her parents already there, her dad grinning ear to ear like he'd just won something. "There he is," her dad said. "Look at that face, Danielle. Told you he'd have your family's chin." I looked at the baby. I looked at Danielle. I looked at her dad's stupid, proud grin. And for the first time in my life, I understood what people mean when they say they went numb. I didn't say anything right then. I want to be clear about that, because some people are going to ask why I didn't just blow up in the hospital room. Here's why. I've worked in insurance underwriting for 8 years. I know how to sit on information. I know that the person who reacts first in a dispute is almost always the person who loses leverage. So I smiled, held my son, because he was still my son in every way that mattered in that room, and I said nothing. That night, after Danielle's parents left and Danielle was asleep, exhausted from labor, I sat in that uncomfortable hospital recliner they give the dads, and I made a list on my phone. Not an angry list, a calm one. Step 1, get an independent paternity test done privately, not through the hospital, so there's no chance of it getting back to her before I'm ready. Step 2, say nothing until I have results. Step 3, talk to a lawyer. I want to be honest, part of me hoped the doctor was wrong. Blood type stuff can occasionally have weird edge cases, though rare. I clung to that for exactly the 3 days it took to get a private paternity test scheduled and processed. Those 3 days at home with a newborn and a woman I now suspected of massive betrayal were some of the strangest days of my life. Danielle kept saying things like, "our son," and "look how much he already loves his daddy," while I bounced Wesley on my knee and smiled and internally felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching someone else's life happen. The swab test came back 6 days after Wesley was born. 0% probability of paternity. Not 98% excluded, not some ambiguous number. 0. As definitive as these tests get. I sat in my car in a Walgreens parking lot and read that report about 4 times. Then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt this strange, cold calm settle over me. The same calm you'd feel if you found out a business partner had been embezzling from you for years. Betrayal, sure, but also clarity. Everything suddenly made sense. The hotel weekend with the girls, 4 months before I found out she was pregnant. The way she'd gotten weirdly cagey about her phone around that same time. The fact that she pushed hard for us to try to conceive that exact month, practically scheduling it like a business meeting. I called a family law attorney the same afternoon, a woman named Patricia who specialized in paternity fraud cases specifically. Yes, that's a real specialty, apparently common enough to need specialists. She told me something that stuck with me. In this state, if you knowingly raise a child believing it's biologically yours based on your spouse's representation, and it turns out she knew or should have known otherwise, you may have grounds for paternity fraud, which affects both the divorce settlement and potential child support obligations going forward. I don't want to abandon Wesley, I told her immediately. That part mattered to me more than anything else in this whole mess. He didn't ask to be born into a lie. Not his fault. His mother apparently didn't know or didn't care who the father was. That's your choice to make down the line, Patricia said. But legally, you are not obligated to support a child that isn't biologically yours unless you choose to formally adopt or otherwise assume legal parentage. Right now, you have leverage you didn't have a week ago. Let's use it wisely. We spent that consultation building a plan. Document everything. Don't confront yet. Get the timeline of the affair nailed down if possible. Quietly move any joint funds into protected accounts. File the moment we're ready, not a moment before. 2 more days passed. I played the doting husband and father like my life depended on it, because at that point, legally, it kind of did. Then Danielle's sister, Priya, who apparently cannot keep a secret to save her life, texted me by accident. Meant for Danielle. It said, "Does he know yet? You need to tell him before he figures it out himself. This is getting insane." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I typed back, from Danielle's side of the conversation, essentially hijacking it. Tell him what? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, wait, who is this? This is Marcus, Danielle's husband. What does he need to know before he figures it out himself? Nothing for almost 10 minutes. Then, I think you should talk to Danielle. I put the phone down, walked into the living room where Danielle was nursing Wesley, and for the first time since the hospital, I actually said something. Priya just texted asking if you'd told me yet. Told me what, Danielle? Her face did this thing I'll never forget, this full body collapse of composure, like watching a building implode in slow motion. Told you what? I repeated. I don't know what she's talking about, Danielle said, but her voice was already shaking. I got a paternity test done 6 days ago. 0%, Danielle. Not low. 0. She just stared at me. The baby kept nursing, completely unaware his entire existence was currently being renegotiated in real time. You need to let me explain, she finally said. I'm listening. It was one time, back in February, before we even really started trying seriously. I was drunk. It was stupid. It meant nothing. And I convinced myself the math worked out that it could still be yours, and I really believed it might be yours. I swear. You believed it might be mine, I repeated. Might. I didn't want to lose you over one mistake, she said, crying now. I thought if I never told you, it wouldn't matter. He'd grow up thinking you're his dad, and you are his dad in every way that counts. Who's the father? Long pause. Does it matter? Yes, Danielle. It matters a lot, actually, for medical history if nothing else, but also because I'd like to know whose kid I've been raising for a week thinking he was mine. Someone from my old job. Trevor. It was one time. I promise. I want to point out something here, because if you've read enough of these stories, you know the name is never actually the important part. The important part is that she had apparently known, or at minimum strongly suspected, this entire pregnancy, and chose silence over honesty every single day for 9 months, including in a hospital bed hours after delivery, still insisting the baby had her family's chin. You let me cut the cord, I said quietly. You let me hold him first. You let your dad talk about his chin looking like your side, knowing the whole time. I panicked, she said. I kept hoping it would just work out, that you'd never need to know, that it genuinely wouldn't matter. It matters, I said, because you made a decision about my entire life without giving me a say in it. You decided I'd raise another man's child without my knowledge, and the only reason I know the truth is because your sister has a big mouth and a guilty conscience. She tried the crying harder approach next, the one where the tears are supposed to do the negotiating for her. Please don't leave. We can raise him together. He needs a dad. You're the only dad he's ever going to know. He might be, I said. That's actually still up to me. But you don't get to make that decision either. Not anymore. Everything from here forward is going to happen through my lawyer. That's when her face changed from crying desperate to something colder. You already got a lawyer? Before you even talked to me? I got a lawyer the day I got the results, Danielle. Same day. You had 9 months to tell me the truth. I gave myself 6 days to decide how to handle finding it out. I packed a bag that night and went to a hotel. Not out of drama, just because I genuinely could not sleep in that house another night while my head sorted through what had actually happened to the last year of my life. Update 1, about 10 days later. Filed for divorce. Danielle was served at her parents' house, where she'd moved with Wesley temporarily. Her mother called me immediately, the way these mothers always do. How could you do this to her right after having a baby? She had the baby with another man while married to me and let me believe it was mine for 9 months and through delivery, I said. I think the timeline of who did what to whom is pretty clear here. Her mother went quiet, which honestly told me everything. She already knew. Maybe not the whole time, but at some point, she'd found out and said nothing either. Apparently, paternity fraud runs as a family tradition of silence in that household. Danielle's father, The same man who'd stood in that hospital room grinning about his grandson's chin called next, trying a different tactic. "Son, families make mistakes. That baby needs a father figure. Are you really going to punish an innocent child for his mother's mistake?" "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm removing myself from a lie I didn't agree to be part of." If Trevor wants to step up and be a father to his own biological son, that's between him and Danielle. I already have a lawyer looking into whether I have any legal claim regarding paternity fraud, given that Danielle knowingly let me believe I was the father, incurred medical expenses in my name, and put my name on the birth certificate without disclosure. That last part hit different, apparently, because her father got quiet too. Patricia, my lawyer, filed a complaint that included the paternity fraud angle. Turns out in our state, if a spouse knowingly conceals a child's true paternity and the other spouse incurred expenses, emotional distress, or made life decisions based on that deception, there can be grounds for financial recovery, separate from the divorce settlement itself. We're talking medical bills I'd paid, the crib I built, the nursery furniture, even potentially some compensation for emotional damages depending on how aggressive we wanted to get. "I don't want to bankrupt her," I told Patricia honestly. "I just don't want to be on the hook for a kid that isn't mine, and I want this handled cleanly." "Understood," she said. "But leverage is leverage. We'll use what we need and no more." Update 2, 3 weeks in. Danielle's lawyer tried an aggressive opening move, demanding I still be listed as legal father on the birth certificate since I'd been present at birth and had, in her words, held himself out as the father publicly. My lawyer's response was blunt. Being present at birth under active deception doesn't create legal paternity obligation, especially with a documented paternity test excluding biological fatherhood and evidence via the accidental sister text that the mother knew of the possibility beforehand. Then came the deposition. Danielle, under oath, was asked directly when she first suspected Wesley might not be biologically mine. "I want to say I wasn't sure until the blood type came back," she said. Her own sister's earlier text, the "does he know yet? You need to tell him before he figures it out himself" message, was already submitted as evidence. Her lawyer objected to its relevance. The judge allowed it anyway, since it directly contradicted her sworn statement about the timeline of her suspicion. Mrs. Reyes, her own lawyer, had to ask, visibly uncomfortable, "Did you discuss the possibility that the child might not be your husband's with your sister prior to delivery?" Long pause. "We might have talked about it once or twice, as a worst-case scenario. I didn't think it was likely. But you considered it likely enough to discuss with your sister more than once." "I guess so." That single admission did more damage to her credibility than anything my lawyer could have engineered. The judge's face changed noticeably. Trevor, the biological father, got dragged into all of this eventually too. Mostly because Patricia subpoenaed phone records to establish a timeline for the paternity fraud claim. Turns out he had no idea Danielle was even pregnant until after Wesley was born, when apparently her sister, again, the family leak, mentioned it to a mutual friend who mentioned it to him. He wasn't fighting for custody or anything. From what I understand, he was as blindsided as I was, just from the opposite direction. Update 3, 6 weeks in. Financial settlement talks got interesting. Danielle's lawyer tried to argue I should still pay some form of support given the bond formed during the pregnancy and the week following birth. My lawyer's response was that no legal parent-child relationship had been established through adoption or extended acknowledgement, that I'd taken action within days of confirming the deception, and that any bond formed had been built entirely on fraudulent representation. The judge ultimately ruled that I had no legal or financial obligation toward Wesley going forward, given the documented, definitive paternity exclusion and the timeline showing swift action on my part once I had proof. Danielle would need to pursue support from Trevor if she chose to establish paternity legally with him. On the divorce itself, since we'd been married 3 years with no significant shared property beyond the house, which I'd put 60% of the down payment into using an inheritance from my grandmother, the settlement leaned in my favor. House sale proceeds split according to contribution percentage. No spousal support, given the fault-based nature of the dissolution in our state's guidelines. She kept her car. I kept mine. Reasonably clean, all things considered, especially compared to some of the messes I've read about online. The hardest part wasn't the money or the legal wrangling. It was letting go of a week's worth of memories I'd built around a baby who, biologically, wasn't mine. I won't lie and pretend that was easy or that I didn't grieve something in there. I'd held him first. I'd cut his cord. For about a week, before I knew the truth, I was completely, genuinely in love with the idea of being his father. That doesn't just evaporate because a lab report says 0%. But here's the thing I kept coming back to during all of this. Being a father isn't just about biology, but it also isn't something you get tricked into permanently by someone who spent 9 months lying to your face about it. Wesley deserves a dad who chooses him honestly, whether that's Trevor stepping up or Danielle finding someone else down the road who knows exactly what he's signing up for from day one. What he doesn't need is a man who was manipulated into the role under false pretenses, resenting the situation quietly for the next 18 years. That's not fair to him either. Final update. The divorce finalized about 4 months after Wesley was born. Danielle moved back in with her parents permanently, at least for now. Last I heard through the grapevine, because apparently my social circle still somehow intersects with hers occasionally. Trevor did eventually take a paternity test, and it confirmed what we already knew. He's reportedly paying child support now, and from what I understand, is at least somewhat involved, though not thrilled about how any of this unfolded either. Can't blame him for that. Do I think about Wesley? Sometimes, honestly. Not in a way that makes me regret my decision, but in the quiet way you think about a version of your life that almost happened. I built that crib with my own 2 hands. I picked out the going home outfit. For about a week, I was completely, unknowingly, a father. That version of events is gone now, replaced by the actual truth, which is that I was a man who got lied to for 9 months by someone who was supposed to be my partner in everything. My lawyer told me something near the end of all this that stuck with me. The people who fight hardest to keep the truth buried are usually the ones who know exactly how much it's going to cost them once it surfaces. Danielle knew. She knew in February, when it happened. She knew every month her belly grew. She knew in that hospital bed when she told me he had her family's chin. And she knew every single day after that, until her sister's clumsy thumb sent the wrong text to the wrong number. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from a big, dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it comes from a doctor's careful, clinical explanation of blood-type genetics in a small office down a hospital hallway, followed by an accidental text from someone who couldn't carry the weight of the secret anymore. Either way, once I had it, I used it. Calmly, legally, completely. I didn't scream in that hospital room. I didn't need to. I just went home, made a list, and started making decisions that were actually mine to make for the first time in 9 months. If you're going through anything even close to this, get the test privately before you say a single word out loud. Talk to a lawyer who specializes in exactly this before you confront anyone. Document everything, texts, timelines, medical records, all of it. And trust your gut the moment something about a pregnancy or a birth feels off. Because in my experience, guts are rarely wrong about this particular kind of thing. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. If you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Because trust me, there's always a next one. Take care of yourselves, and don't ever let anyone rewrite your own life story without your permission.